Blackbeard became a legendary figure because of the way he died. Before his ultimate demise, he was creating enemies at an absolutely absurd rate, hundreds every single week. When he defeated a captain, he would decapitate him and then hang his head on the bowsprit of his ship. But that terror made him so incredibly famous that nothing was ever the same, and his very appearance amplified that terror even further. Merchants fled, sailors actively avoided him, and the authorities began to view him as a serious problem that absolutely had to disappear. A story documented by pirates Dia de Bonnet recounts that one night Edward shot one of his men under the table, simply to maintain the respect of the others. But what no one imagined was that his death would be even more brutal than his own crimes. On a typical November day in the year 1718, they were waiting for him. Teach's ship was anchored just off Ocracoke Island in North Carolina. The governor of Virginia dispatched Lieutenant Robert Maynard with 2 swift sailing vessels, unburdened by heavy cannons, yet brimming with experienced sailors and skilled musketeers. This force, they believed, would be more than sufficient to capture any pirate of that era. However, what they failed to realize was that Edward Teach was considerably more formidable and resilient than all the others. Teach, observing their approach, immediately prepared his entire crew for the inevitable combat. He fired his cannons, and the first shots killed several of Maynard's men. Maynard then ordered his crew to hide below deck, feigning defeat. Teach took the bait and boarded the ship. As Edward and his men boarded the enemy vessel, Maynard's hidden sailors immediately emerged. A fierce hand-to-hand combat erupted on the bloody deck. Edward and Maynard confronted each other directly. They shot each other at point-blank range. Blackbeard was hit, but he kept on fighting. This was not what ultimately finished him off. Blackbeard then drew his cutlass and struck Maynard, completely shattering his sword. He was just about to deliver the final decisive blow when one of Maynard's own men cut him across the throat from behind. Even so, Blackbeard continued to fight. He was surrounded by sailors who shot at him and repeatedly stabbed him with their swords. He reportedly took about 5 musket balls and 20 sword wounds before he finally collapsed. Blackbeard died right there on the deck.
Maynard cut off his head and then he hung it from the bowsprit of his ship as a trophy.
Teach's headless body was unceremoniously thrown into the sea in Ocracoke Inlet, and his head was then transported to Virginia, where it was impaled in the harbor as a grim warning. John Rackham was known for something that was considered scandalous, even among pirates. He had 2 women in his crew, Anne Bonny and Mary Red, who fought with the same fierce intensity as any man. Rackham was also the creator of one of the most iconic pirate flags, featuring a skull with 2 crossed swords beneath it. This design is often confused with the traditional Jolly Roger, but it was, in fact, his very own unique creation. The story all began with his capture in October of 1720, when a Jamaican naval vessel cornered his ship right off the coast. The majority of his crew, including himself, was quite intoxicated below deck. Only Anne and Mary put up any real resistance to the boarding. After their capture, everyone was transported to Jamaica to face trial. The trial proceeded quickly, but the worst part came after his death. Before his execution, Anne Bonny supposedly visited him in his cell and scornfully told him, "If you had fought like a man, you wouldn't be dying like a dog." On the day of his execution, Rackham was led to the gallows of Port Royal. A large crowd gathered to witness the colorful pirate's death. The noose was placed around his neck, the trapdoor opened, and Jack died by hanging. His destiny did not end there. The Jamaican authorities were resolute that his death should stand as a powerful and enduring warning. His body was then lowered from the gallows and subsequently confined within a sturdy iron cage. This structure was meticulously designed to keep the cadaver in an upright position and to prevent any possibility of burial. The cage was transported to a small, desolate island situated at the very entrance of Port Royal's bustling harbor. There, a tall post was erected, and the cage containing Rackham's lifeless body was hung. The relentless tropical sun slowly cooked his remains. The seabirds would peck at the flesh through the iron bars, and the relentless rain and the strong winds slowly began to break it down, little by little. The island came to be known as Rackham's Cay. For many years, his bones remained clearly visible, hanging and swaying gently with the Caribbean breeze. A brutal reminder for anyone who might have ever considered a life of piracy in the treacherous Jamaican waters. Captain William Kidd, for example, famously died not just once, but twice. On the 23rd of May in the year 1701, William Kidd, a man of 56 years, stood upon the execution dock at Wapping in London, making ready to face his death. However, the course of events took an unexpected turn. Captain Kidd had previously been a highly respected privateer and a skilled captain prior to the accusations of piracy and murder being leveled against him. His trial was quite a spectacle, and he was condemned, despite his persistent claims that he had been betrayed by his sponsors. The execution dock was the traditional place in London to hang pirates, located on the River Thames and timed to coincide with low tide. On the night before his execution, someone managed to get him a substantial amount of rum. When the guards came to remove him from his cell that morning, Kidd was found to be completely intoxicated. He could barely manage to stand upright as he ascended the gallows steps. The executioner placed the rope around Kidd's neck and positioned him directly over the trapdoor. A large crowd had gathered to witness the death of the infamous captain. The executioner pulled the lever. The trapdoor opened, Kidd fell, but something truly extraordinary occurred. The rope snapped. Kidd plunged into the living mud below. Some cried out that it was a clear sign from God and that he should be pardoned. Others saw a miracle. But the authorities had no intention of granting him any clemency. The guards once again dragged the dazed and drunken Kidd back up to the gallows platform. A new rope was placed around his neck once more. This time the trapdoor opened, and the rope finally held. William Kidd died, hanged at execution dock. But his story did not end there. His body was covered with tar to preserve it, and then enclosed in an iron cage, a gibbet. The caged corpse was then hung on a post at Tilbury Point, right beside the River Thames. It remained there for 3 years, exposed to the sun, the rain, and the carrion birds, visible to all ships entering or leaving London. His head was mounted on a separate pike, and his belongings were publicly displayed. The message was clear. Whoever dared to become a pirate would end up hanged, chained, and decomposed before the eyes of the world. Benjamin Hornigold. In the early 18th century, Benjamin Hornigold was one of the most active pirates in the Caribbean. He was feared for his swift attacks and his knowledge of trade routes between the Bahamas and British colonies. Unlike other pirates, Hornigold had a peculiar code. He wouldn't attack British ships. He said he was still loyal to the crown, though he lived by plunder. This put him in conflict with his crew, who viewed that rule as an absurd limitation. One of his own trusted officers eventually rebelled against him and successfully deposed him from his position. That particular officer was none other than Edward Teach, who would later become the infamous Blackbeard. Hornigold himself then disappeared from the world of piracy shortly thereafter in 1718, when King George offered a royal pardon to all pirates who would surrender. Hornigold accepted. But this is where the story takes a curious turn. Instead of quietly retiring, he was hired by the very governor of the Bahamas to hunt pirates, among them his former companions. For 2 long years, he dedicated himself to tracking, capturing, and delivering to the gallows those with whom he had once sailed. His end was not on the gallows, nor in combat, nor imprisoned in a cage. In 1719, his ship was shipwrecked off the coast of Cuba during a powerful storm. There is no conclusive evidence as to whether he died in the wreck or survived and was lost to anonymity. The fate of Anne Bonny is one of the most enigmatic throughout all of pirate history. After her capture in October of 1720, alongside Mary Read and the rest of Jack Rackham's crew, Anne was put on trial in Jamaica for the crime of piracy. During the proceedings, she pleaded guilty, and the verdict was clear. She was to die by hanging, but she had a strategy. However, just like Mary, Anne announced that she was pregnant. According to English law, this suspended her execution until after the baby was born. She was then imprisoned in Spanish Town while her condition was verified. During her trial, Anne Bonny was described by the witnesses as a truly fierce and formidable fighter. She would actively fight on the ship's decks, wielding both saber and pistol. And she did so with such a raw, untamed fury that it intimidated even the most hardened men. One of the sailors reportedly stated that neither the heavy shackles nor her flowing skirt could make her seem any less dangerous. While this isn't known with absolute certainty, what is undeniably true is that her striking figure quickly became a legendary tale. Anne Bonny herself truly transformed into the enduring symbol of the fiercely independent pirate woman, one who boldly defied all societal gender norms and lived entirely by her very own rules. However, unlike Mary Read, there are no official records of Anne Bonny's execution. No date, no document, no witness to her death. She simply vanished from historical records. This has led to multiple theories. Some believe she was freed due to her father, an influential merchant in South Carolina. Others say he escaped from the prison with the help of sympathizers. There is also the possibility that he died in prison and his death was not recorded. Nathaniel Rowe was known as Red Gale, named for the scarlet banner he would hoist before launching an attack. He was considered one of the most dreaded buccaneers in the South Atlantic. Unlike most other pirates, he did not display the traditional skull and crossbones. Instead, his banner featured a galleon engulfed in raging flames against a blood-red background, a stark warning that no mercy would be granted. Based on accounts from mariners of the time, he first gained notoriety in the early 18th century, and for a period of 5 years Rowe relentlessly plundered the shipping lanes between Africa and South America, seizing slave ships, Portuguese merchant vessels, and any other craft that possessed gold, gunpowder, or rum. His fame grew especially among freed slaves, as he allowed some to join his crew in exchange for their freedom and weapons. But his cruelty was also widely known. When an enemy captain refused to surrender, Rowe would tie him to the ship's figurehead, alive, for days, exposed to the sun, the salt, and utter humiliation. A peculiar thing was that Rowe never, ever stepped foot on solid ground. He held a superstition. He firmly believed that if he touched land, he would surely die in less than a week. For well over 1,800 consecutive days, he never once abandoned his vessel. His ultimate end arrived quite unexpectedly. By mid-1719, after they had plundered a Spanish galleon off the coast of Brazil, a significant portion of his crew mutinied. They had been toiling for many months without any rest, without receiving their due pay, and with utterly insufficient rations. They accused Rowe of secretly stashing away gold in hidden compartments, deliberately keeping it far away from everyone. One night, while he was sleeping in his cabin, he was ambushed, beaten, and thrown overboard. But his crew didn't know what lurked beneath the waters. Minutes after Rowe's body hit the water, a gigantic shadow emerged. A sperm whale, possibly drawn by the blood from recent battles, rose from the depths and devoured him in a single gulp before the eyes of his own men. Stede Bonnet was unlike any other pirate of his time. Born into a wealthy family on a Barbados plantation, he abandoned it all to become a pirate, earning the moniker the Gentleman Pirate. His short career as a pirate was largely a failure. He was captured after attempting to negotiate a pardon that never arrived. On December the 10th in the year 1718, 30-year-old Stede Bonnet found himself in Charlestown, South Carolina, on the very verge of execution. The morning of his impending execution, Bonnet adorned himself in his very finest clothes, as if he were attending a grand social event rather than facing his own imminent death. He was clad in elegant attire, truly befitting his aristocratic background and noble origin. He even held a small bouquet of flowers, though they were already withered from his time in prison. A militia unit was assembled to escort him to the gallows. As the procession moved forward, the drums beat a slow and solemn pace. Bonnet walked through the bustling streets of Charlestown, making his way towards the gallows, which was situated quite close to the harbor. Hundreds of colonists had gathered there to witness the public execution. As he ascended the steps of the scaffold, he started to visibly lose his composure. His legs were shaking, and he was about to faint. The guards had to hold him while the executioner adjusted the rope. Bonnet was placed on a cart under the beam of the gallows. The rope was pulled taut, and then the executioner lashed the horse. The cart lurched forward, Bonnet dropped, and the rope snapped taut. The gentleman pirate met his end, hanged with his fine clothes and his withered bouquet serving as silent witnesses to his tragic final moments. However, the authorities in Charlestown were determined that Bonnet should not become a martyr or a legendary figure. So, after cutting him down from the gallows, his lifeless body was transported to the desolate marshes, far beyond the reach of the high tide line. He was cast into the briny mud, where the relentless tides would eventually cover him and slowly, but surely, obliterate all traces of his existence. The precise location of his final resting place was meticulously kept a secret. They had no desire for his burial site to ever transform into a revered sanctuary, nor for his notorious tale to serve as an inspiration for any future generations of pirates. Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts was the most successful pirate of all time, but he met his end in less than a minute without even managing to give a single order. On February 10th, 1722, off the coast of West Africa, the pirate ship Royal Fortune was navigating, with a portion of its crew still intoxicated from a celebration held the previous night. On board was Bartholomew Roberts, famously known as Black Bart, a man of 40 years, boasting a formidable record of more than 400 captured vessels. He was certainly no ordinary pirate, but a figure of considerable renown. He wore fine clothes, gold chains, drank tea instead of rum, and forbade gambling, fighting, and harassment of women. His ship followed a strict code, even with set sleeping hours. But that morning, all of that ceased to matter. On the horizon appeared the HMS Swallow, a British warship. Roberts decided not to flee. While his crew was still recovering from their hangovers, the Royal Fortune moved in to engage. It was a fatal mistake. The Swallow fired a volley of grape shot, iron balls designed to kill men, not to sink ships. One of them went right through his throat, and Roberts died instantly. He fell onto the deck, still dressed in his crimson jacket and his gold chain around his neck. His crew went into a panic. They knew that if his body fell into British hands, they would display it as a trophy. But Roberts had been clear. He didn't want to end up hanged. Quickly, his men bound the body with heavy chains and then cast it into the sea. Minutes later, without a leader, the royal fortune was completely overwhelmed. Most of the pirates were captured and subsequently executed, but Blackbeard's body was never recovered. He died in mere seconds and sank within minutes. And because they couldn't hang him, his legend grew more than the rest. Charles Vane had been one of the most violent and stubborn pirates of his time. Unlike others who accepted royal pardons to save their own skin, he repeatedly refused. He mercilessly attacked other pirates, merchants, and fishermen. But his downfall began in a most unexpected way. His very own crew mutinied against him. After Vane had refused to engage a French warship, considering it to be far too dangerous, his crew, under the leadership of Jack Rackham, deposed him from his command as captain and marooned him on a small, desolate island. Months later, he was shipwrecked during a hurricane. He survived alone on a deserted island for many weeks until he was eventually rescued by a passing ship whose captain recognized him. Vane was then taken to Jamaica, where he was promptly imprisoned and subsequently tried for acts of piracy. The outcome of the trial was, of course, entirely inevitable. Throughout the entire legal process, Vane displayed no remorse whatsoever, nor did he offer any form of defense. He was destined to die as he had lived, with defiance. The morning of his execution, the guards removed him from his cell and escorted him to the gallows in Port Royal. A large crowd had gathered to witness the feared pirate's death. Vane walked to the gallows with the very same arrogance he always displayed at sea. Witnesses of the era wrote that he uttered no plea and maintained a defiant gaze until the very end. Charles was hanged, but authorities wanted to ensure his infamy would endure. They lowered his body, covered it with tar to preserve it, wrapped it in chains, and hung it from a post in a public place. For weeks, his corpse swayed off the coast, visible to settlers, sailors, and future pirates. Finally, the body was reduced to bones, but even then, his remains stayed exposed. Mary Red had lived an extraordinary life. From a very young age, she disguised herself as a man to enlist as a soldier, and later became one of the few recognized female pirates in all of history. She was a part of Jack Rackham's crew and fought bravely side by side with Anne Bonny, another truly legendary pirate. During the boarding that led to Rackham's capture in 1720, many of the men were drunk and offered little resistance. But Mary and Anne fought with ferocity, confronting the sailors who were coming aboard. Witnesses stated they fought with greater courage than the majority of men. During the trial, when it was revealed that Mary Red was a woman, some members of the court believed it was impossible for a woman to have fought as she did. But her companions testified that she fought like a demon. Just like Anne Bonny, Mary also declared that she was pregnant. Under English law, pregnant women could not be executed until after childbirth in order to protect the child. This gave them time, and in Anne's case, perhaps something more. She was imprisoned, but the conditions in the prison were brutal. Filth, spoiled food, and no medical attention. In April of 1721, Mary Red developed a high fever. Some believe it was a complication of her pregnancy, while others simply attributed it to the unsanitary conditions of the cell. Prison fever. Unlike many pirates who were hanged or locked away in cages, Mary died behind bars at the young age of 22, a victim of illness and oblivion. Don't forget to support this type of content by subscribing and checking out this other very curious video that you will surely love.